panel. We have assembled a very good panel, His Excellency and our British Ambassador and Embassy folks. So I will basically, what I'll do is I'm going to start by introducing our individual panelists and then start a good discussion. I mean, the idea is to have a good and healthy interaction about the future of Nepali migration, especially in the Middle East. I'm also going to encourage all the people that are listening and are participating in this forum. There's a chat box on to your right. And if you would like to ask any questions as the panel discussion is going, we will take the time and take a pause during our discussion to take on your questions as well. So please feel free to put those questions on the chat box next to the screen. I'd like to first start by introducing the first member on our panel. And what I'll do is I'll first introduce each one of the members and I'll ask them to provide some introduction background. I'll go one by one and then I'll come back and start a conversation. I want to first start with David Stockton, who's the CEO of Dulsco. David, thanks very much for joining us. David has over 30 years of experience holding leadership positions in multinational organizations across the world, and of course in all different types of industries, whether it's aviation or facility management, or even including manpower. He is the CEO and Managing Director of UAE's longest serving people and environmental solutions business. And I was really amazed by, David will tell us a little bit about the humble origins and beginnings of the company. An 85-year-old Emirati organization owned by the Emiratis, 85-year-old, and how it really started, and now has a strong workforce of over 12,000 people that work across their different service lines and industries. So David is very passionate about the synergy among employees, customers, and the community. So he is going to talk a lot more about how he sees and perceives this whole discussion about not only just skilling and recruitment, but also in terms of what we do with fair recruitment. So David, let me start off by asking you, David, could you give us a little bit of background about Dulsco and a little bit about your vision as a company and in terms of your growth plans for the next 2-3 years, and where does development of manpower, workforce development fit into your overarching vision as a company? Over to you, David.
Thank you, and Your Excellency, thank you very much for your introduction speech as well. Yeah, Dulsco began its history 1935 on the banks of the creek, and it started with its founder literally out walking with one of his friends. And back in the day, the dhows were on very short anchor, and they noticed a dhow needed unloading, so they began helping the dhow captain unloading the dhow. And a stevedoring business was born out of multiple dhows, Dubai being a trading port back in the day. And its business continued rapidly with the advent of a manpower business. Dulsco's actual name is an acronym for what was then Dubai Labour Supply Company, so DU, LA, and then obviously Dulsco as in SO Supply Company. So an interesting beginning. As you said, we're over 12,500 people in the UAE. We also have about 2,300 people in Qatar. Our business is split really 3 ways of being a human capital business, both in long-term legacy customers in the people business, as well as about a 22-year-old environmental business, which has really moved away from just waste transportation to the treatment, the repurposing, and the reprocessing now of waste, as well as our white collar business, which is permanent placement and outsourcing. And obviously a business like ours is highly dependent on a skilled, an unskilled, and a semi-skilled workforce. So everything that we can do to bring in and raise the bar of people's skills is what we want to do. Naturally, with all of our businesses on this panel, there is a natural churn every year, and replacing that skill is obviously a time and commercial challenge. And the more we can do within country, the better, because it speeds up the process ultimately for all of our customers.
Thank you, David. Thanks very much for the introduction. Before I move on to the next panelists and have them introduce themselves, I also want to acknowledge the presence of Lisa, who's joined us. Lisa is the head of development at the British Embassy. Lisa, good afternoon to you, or good morning. It's really a great honor to have you, Lisa.
I have one. It's good morning from me.
Good morning, Lisa. Good morning. Yes, Honorable Ambassador. Oh, sorry. Oh, he just took a brief. Did you have anything to? Oh,
sorry, my colleague who replaced me just a few minutes, he will be here.
Sure,
Mr.
Ambassador.
Ibrahim is also the
Sure,
he's the
sure.
counselor here.
Thank you. So we will now move on to I'm going to introduce our next member on our panel. I'm going to introduce Joe Fernando, who's a regional HR director with Sodexo. Sodexo, everybody knows, I mean, Joe has extensive experience in the facility services industry. Joe specializes in human resources management and also performance management, employee management, recruiting. He's worked for over 20 years, and his current role at Sodexo Catering and Facility Management is in the position of a regional HR director. Prior to his current involvement, he led the HR function for Sodexo in Kuwait, Iraq, and Oman. He's also been instrumental in helping set up a lot of these flagship properties that the Jumeirah Group has in the UAE, of course, the Burj Al Arab, the Emirates Tower, and the Medina Jumeirah. So, Joseph, you know, Sodexo, tell us a little bit about Sodexo and the origins of Sodexo and the importance that Sodexo plays in the economy in the Gulf and abroad, and how do you see workforce development? Joseph, you're on mute.
Is it audible now?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Baljit, for this opportunity, and His Excellency and the panelist and the participant. Good afternoon, good morning. Just to talk about Sodexo. Sodexo started as a small family-owned company in southern part of France, in Marseille, and started with the ship chandling operation services, and it's grown up very drastically. And today we are about 420,000 people across the globe, and serving 100 million consumers every day. And particularly Middle East, we are about 10,000 people, and into quality of service given to our customer and clients. And what is that meaning? And what we do, and predominantly in the globe, we have 3 divisions, which is called on-site services and benefit and rewards and personal and home services. We belong to on-site services. What do we do in on-site services? Basically food solutions and the facility management, which includes soft and hard. So this particularly in Middle East, Sodexo presence there about 30 years. And as we said that, and we strongly growing in this part of the world. We have a clear growth strategy, global strategy, and particularly in Middle East and UAE. So so we have to support that, and the management focus on the principle where we get the right people to grow and in this part of the world. And as I said, Sodexo is a very globally responsible company, as you know it. We have got a lot of medals and awards for that. And also we have joined Charter with an ILO to fight for the fundamental rights of people across the globe. And we are very strong with our values of service spirit, team spirit, and spirit of progress, combined with our ethical principles. Okay, so when you talk about ethical recruitment, all comes in part of the world. Just to say that in Sodexo, particularly having ethical and compliance in team globally governing the entire region. So this topic enough for us, and which might be support for us in our efforts, what will we do to bring the right people to our organization and around the globe, and particularly in Middle East.
Thank you, Joseph. Thanks very much. And notwithstanding the fact, an interesting statistic for a lot of people is that I understand from Joseph that Sodexo feeds close to about 1.8 billion people every day in the Middle East. Is that correct, Joseph, or is the number higher than 1.8 million?
No, we said that globally 100 million consumers every day.
No, how many people do you feed in the Middle East, in Dubai, in the UAE, every day?
Million.
A million people every day that you feed. Good. Okay, so we're now going to move on to, I'm going to ask Tony. Tony, who's a regional manager for Middle East, North Africa, and Europe for City and Guilds. Tony, thanks very much for joining us. Tony has been based in Dubai. He's responsible for over 300 vocational centers, certifying approximately 25,000 people every year. And Tony has been working in the Middle East for over 25 years now, supporting government and employers to engage in effective skilling initiatives, that make a positive difference to people's lives and aspirations. So I'm going to ask Tony to talk a little bit about City and Guilds in the Middle East and North Africa and the portfolio that you oversee. Your a little bit of background about yourself, about City and Guilds, and if you could tell us a little bit about that, would be great, Tony.
Thank you, and so it's wonderful to be here. So it's great to hear His Excellency talk about the wonderful things that the UAE are focused on for migrant workers, and also the panelists' contribution to that. So City and Guilds plays a part to a certain extent where we can. So let me give you a little background about City and Guilds. So the City and Guilds of London Institute was founded 140 years ago by the Corporation of the City of London and 16 livery companies, which are called the Guilds, to really protect and promote the standard of technical education. The organisation is a Royal Chartered Institute and registered charity, and we have retained our link with the UK Royal Family since 1881. And today, the president of the Institute is Her Royal Highness, the Princess Royal. The Institute is the awarding body for City and Guilds and ILM qualifications, and it also is the founding organisation for the City and Guilds Group, which I'll talk a little bit about later. All those businesses within the group are focused around various stages of the skills journey. So let's go back to City and Guilds, with the core business is its qualifications, assessment and accreditation. And we work with training centres of all types, both as well as with employers and governments across about 80 countries, including Nepal. We work with over 10,000 centres and support over 3 million learners each year to develop their skills in a wide range of sectors, such as hospitality and catering, construction, engineering, oil and gas, business, manufacturing, automotive, IT, etc. I think it's 25 industries that we engage with. But I think what really sets us apart from similar organisations is our strong sense of purpose, which informs every decision we make. Our purpose today remains the same as it always has, to enable people and organisations to develop their skills for personal and economic growth. I think the way I like to talk about our purpose is quite simple. We're all about skills and jobs, and we exist to help people get into their first job, progress on the job, and move on to the next one. So we have a number of companies within the group. One is called Kineo. It develops in-house training programs for businesses, helping people progress within organisations and develop specific skills for their job development. We've got ILM and the Oxford Group, which both focus on leadership and management skills, from higher level and degree level leadership apprenticeships through to CEO training and mentoring. And we've also got a very exciting new business called Digital Me. It's in digital credentialing, and it uses digital badges to recognise people's skills and talents, which I think is going to be a very positive disruptor in how people's competence is actually recognised. And could play a critical part actually in the governance for migrant recruitment. Our presence in the Middle East goes back about 50 years. We've been here in Dubai informally for about 2008, and our main operations are vocational consultancy for national development, leadership and management, engineering, and supporting the service sector. I'm looking forward to hearing more about what we can do.
Thank you, Tony. Thanks very much, and great to have you. And I'm sure we're going to explore some synergy here as we go along. There's already one in the making, as I described earlier. Simon. Simon, as some of you or most of you all know, has 30 years of experience, including acting as the Chief Operating Officer of the US 7 billion Expo 2020 in Dubai and the 2015 inaugural US 1 billion in European Games in Baku, and also serving as for 12 years as the Chief Executive of the British Olympic Association years ago. And then at the same time, also a board member of the subsequent bid and organizing the LOCOG committee, and also one of 3 British signatories on the host city contract when London was awarded the event. Simon, it's great to have you. I'm really curious, Simon, why is it that you have taken on the despite these C-suite positions that you've enjoyed all your life and being based here in the Middle East and doing a lot of interesting work with large corporates, what attracted you to Vision and Values, and why? What are you doing with Vision and Values? And what do you see in Vision and Values and an initiative that we are trying to achieve? I'd like to hear a lot from you, Simon.
Well, thanks, Baljit. Thanks for that introduction, and I'm delighted to contribute to today's debates. About 18 months ago, I was approached by Padam Pudel, the founder of Vision and Value, an existing recruitment company based in Kathmandu, providing migrant workforce into the Middle East. And Padam articulated to me his vision for what the necessary transformation that his business was going to have to go through. Because through the experience that he had of working with employers in the Middle East, he realized that there was a significant change that was taking place and that was needed to take place. So it was taking place within the minds of the employers, but needed to take place within the structure back in Nepal. I had the opportunity of going to Nepal, and I found an industry that was absolutely in need for significant transformation. The current situation of recruitment out of Nepal is not optimum. It's not optimum either for the employer or indeed for the migrant workers, and change was necessary. And this was entirely consistent with my experience and the leadership that I was able to deliver through running Expo 2020, where we ran very much on an ethical recruitment basis, and that we gave a lot of attention to workers' welfare. I think the whole, there is a significant change taking place in terms of the need for employers to take a much more responsible approach to how they deal with their migrant workers, from recruitment all the way through until servicing and managing those individuals once they are in country. I have a background many years ago in the British Army, and therefore I've got a natural empathy with Nepal, having had the opportunity of spending some time working with the Nepalese British Gurkhas. And I was asked by Padam to help him transform Vision and Value, but also to expand its service provision. First of all, by creating a training center, a pilot training center in Kathmandu to upskill unskilled workers and to provide them with a vocational training qualification that would give them better long-term career prospects and allow them to send more money back home into Nepal that would obviously help the Nepalese economy. So transforming Vision and Value in terms of what was being needed by employers in the Middle East. Secondly, by creating this training establishment, working with what I believe to be the world's leading vocational training accreditation body, City and Guilds. And then thirdly, working with employers who want to de-risk the employment process and backload more of the training into Nepal that would reduce their costs. And therefore, we will be working with employers on specific programs for employees, migrant workers that are going to go into their specific workforce, delivering programs on behalf of those employers back in Nepal. So that's the background in terms of how I become involved with Vision and Value. And it's all been driven by the founder's vision.
Thank you, Simon. Thanks very much. Suvi, I'm going to ask you to just wait for the next round of questioning, and I want you to come in and talk a little bit about the operating model and vision of SEP. Before we do that, Suvi, I want to just go back and start the conversation with David, and then I'll ask the others to come in. David, tell me a little bit about the composition of the Nepalese in your workforce, and what really drives you towards looking at Nepal as a destination to recruit workers today and in the next 2 to 3 years. What are the key underlying unique characteristics about Nepal that appeal to you? And what are some of the things that don't appeal to you that you believe need to be corrected as far as the recruitment in Nepal is concerned? We'd like to hear from you, David.
Sure. So the Nepalese workforce amount to about 15% of our workforce today. They are split across what we would call semi-skilled and unskilled. The attractiveness of the workforce, bizarrely, we have a very strong seaport operation, and everybody knows Nepal has got the tallest mountain in the world. And last time I checked, there was no ocean surrounding it. But we seem to have, there seems to be a very high skill level and agility level of the workforce, certainly within our stevedoring and our seaport operations. The other area is within aviation. And within aviation, again, that agility and strength, both of body and mind, I think have allowed a large portion of our workforce, not only in the UAE, but also in Qatar as well, to be a go-to community within aviation. I think the other part of attractiveness of when we're recruiting is that aviation obviously has been an enormous growing sector. You know, it's what, 30% of the GDP of the UAE. So therefore the strength of knowing the longevity of your job and role is an attractiveness, but it has a downside, which I'll come back to in a moment. In terms of the workforce in general, what we've seen is a trusted, honest workforce, slightly community-led. So it seems to be what we would call sort of pack and herd mentality. So it tends to be a group of people that want to work together. So fragmentation and different roles become a challenge, but I think through the education that has helped. Our largest two other recruitment areas are obviously Pakistan and India, but again with different dynamics for different industries, and it's something that we would like to explore further. We would like to recruit a large proportion of females because of some of the customer service roles that we have, both customer facing directly and back of house. And there are some areas which I'll come on to later when we get into this discussion, that we have specific needs for what we call skilled roles. They're skilled because they're in charge of very expensive vehicles and in a high risk area. And of the proportion of people that we have, it is predominantly male. I would like to see that change, and our business would like to see that change. And I would welcome the challenge and the opportunity of upskilling females to be able to operate these vehicles. And I'm talking buses, and in the environmental space, the waste management vehicles, which have a degree of obviously driving skill, but also a degree of customer awareness of where you're operating. And that would be something I'd like to see a great deal more of. Some of the challenges that we face are around the perception of the visa process. And, you know, predominantly because we're an onshore company, we're a 2-year visa cycle where for everybody that's listening, your visa is redone every 2 years through the medical program of the UAE and other markets. And obviously you rejoin, but there seems to be a challenge with people understanding from a workforce point of view that it's not just a 2-year fixed program. And that's what I referred to before in aviation and seaports. This has enormous longevity. We've been operating in Dubai's and the UAE's airports for since the beginning. So we've got that skill level, and therefore that job creation is there. And there will be natural churn. People will move and migrate either back home or to another country. But that doesn't mean just because there's a 2-year stamp in your visa that you will only stay for 2 years. It is obviously as long as you want it to be. And that's something I think we've got to be able to overcome. So there is an enormous attractiveness for people that want to know what they're doing day in, day out, rather than just being a standby labourer to go and help out on X, Y, or Z over a period of time. And I think that's something that needs sorting out. And we put a lot of time and effort into coming to country. So we come to Nepal, we don't rely on an agency. We will come in and work with our RPs, our recruitment partner, and we will present what we are offering. And that is something I would like to see a hell of a lot more, working hand in hand and symbiotic with the ability, to work with the recruitment partners and the ethical recruitment partners of what is actually happening on the ground.
David, I'll come to the ethical recruitment part in a few minutes. I just wanted to build on what you just described in the context of what really drives you towards employing Nepalese workers. Joseph, having heard what David had to say about some of the inherent characteristics of Nepalese, does it also resonate with you as a business? Or what is it about your business that attracts you towards Nepal? And what are you think are some of the challenges that you also face when dealing with recruiting and hiring Nepalese workers?
Regarding, if you look at the global numbers of Sodexo, 55% of them representing women workforce. Okay, and when David was talking about and challenges bringing women into roles, and Sodexo got a diversity and inclusion as a kind of a policy, and to ensure that and diversifying workforce. And globally, Sodexo representing 55% of the women workforce. That being said, that become a kind of a challenge in Middle East. Middle East and our representation of female workforce is not that much. And if I look at Middle East and generally what we have, exactly like in 15 to 16% of the workforce represent Nepalese. And when I look at the last 22 years of my experience in Middle East, I'm traveling and frequently to Nepal to recruit people. So one of the best things I've found on Nepalese, they're hardworking, they are loyal, and high sense of responsibility and discipline. Okay, so this is all really positive about the Nepali workforce. Nepali government as well made as much as easy on that and part of taking people. So coming to the skill or unskilled composition of the workforce in our systems, and we have about globally or even in that represent Middle East, it's about 10% of the managerial workforce, remaining of them unskilled or semi-skilled or no skill. So what we are trying to do is trying to change the proposition in our workforce composition, and especially the subcontinent, particularly to India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, and Nepal, and where we have influx and the government policies are more flexible, ex-Bangladeshis. So we are trying to bring as much as people, and we have in-house and upskilling program to develop them through and promote them into layers. So that's a kind of a motivation people to stay in the company long term. You know, recently, and we were doing the long service award ceremony, and believe me, out of in UAE, and half of the people have been crossing 10 years and above. That shows the loyalty of the employee. And people stay with Sodexo not because of just the job. They feel there is a career in this company. I've seen people leaving the company, and when I go for the recruitment drive next time, I could see them and standing there and just saying they come back, they want to come back. Even though at times, and they feel that and something betterment on the other side, but they still feel something missed out in their career, which has been given by Sodexo. So Nepalese workforce has been always, and as I said, and the third highest population in our workforce size. And we would like to work with us, as I said in the beginning, Sodexo was very strong in ethical way of conducting business. And our ethical principles like in loyalty, respect for people, transparency, and business integrity. These are our ethical principles. We'll make sure every business is been conducted in the right way. We had challenges in whatever we could see, and this is what we get in support from the government bodies or any other authorities. And we would like to do more with Nepal, which is again UAE government that really encouraged and hired a lot of Nepalese. That's an opportunity for Sodexo as well.
Great. Thanks, Joseph. That's interesting. So, Tony, I just wanted to move over to you. I mean, from the vantage point that you said, I mean, given the fact that you are coming across nationalities from across each of these countries in South Asia, that you probably have had to deal with when you've been courting regional employers here in the Gulf and dealing with them. What do you think are some of the unique attributes you see about the Nepalese vis-a-vis people from other parts of the subcontinent or even elsewhere? Because you're also in charge of North Africa. You've probably seen an influx of North Africans also here. What do you see are the key differences, and what are some of the challenges you face with you think are with Nepalese space here?
I'd just like to make a general comment actually on what's just been discussed in respects to retention and recruitment. So we're seeing those more progressive companies who have an appreciation of what skills that they require in their business, want to retain that talent, And they do that by having a structured upskilling program like Sodexo and probably Dulsco as well. So, for instance, a great example there is Americana, who work with very closely, and they have layered qualifications that are not specific to Americana, but allow this kind of transportability and credit, which will allow people to cash them in another institution, or like a university or higher education. And really what you want to do is have a pathway from no skill right through to highly skilled or highly educated. And if you can try to, in some ways, imbue that within the organization, you'll start attracting the type of talent and interest that you expect. I think very early on, I think His Excellency mentioned it on this discussion, the UAE and the GCC are looking for higher levels of skill, and they're prepared to reward that, no question about it. Now, Nepal is competing in a very competitive environment for skills. We've got Bangladesh, we've got Pakistan, we've got India, we've got Philippines, and new entrants from North Africa, as you pointed out, Kenya, Uganda, or other places like this. So what is it that is a differentiator? What is the USP? What do Nepalese bring to the table? And certainly from our perspective, we see them being very effective in the service sector. And I'm pleased to see that the hospitality and tourism area, although it's been fairly badly hit, admittedly, with the COVID-19, still, the bedrock for growth and progression in that is still very, very good. In fact, City and Guilds is putting a big focus around hospitality and certification, not just in formal qualifications, but on-job training that is recognizable and creditworthy. And I think these things that come together will allow people to retain the type of talent and staff that they need to grow their business. So when we look out in, say, the hospitality area, we're looking for things like, for people with attributes like commitment, the communication skills. I think the English proficiency is quite critical in that respect, and computer know-how, enthusiasm, all the things that our colleague from Sodexo mentioned. So I think the Nepalese have a service orientation that I see here, who are working in certain places that I connect with, and they seem to shine in that. Another area which is quite interesting are kind of new areas, like in healthcare, social healthcare, geriatric services, even in respects to security. I mean, one of my largest customers is Dubai Police. And the license to practice for being a security guard is something which you have to go through. Saying that, I see more again. I suppose African, Sudanese, that type of thing. But that's, I think, changing. And I think the English language proficiency seems to be a big, something which really will put Nepal there. And I think actually, if I really think about it, Nepal, their nearest competitor maybe is the Philippines in respects to attributes and attitudes and personality. And I think that is something where Nepal needs to really position itself, this kind of like semi-skilled to high-skilled area. And I think really it starts off with Nepal and what they do with their vocational system to get people to those areas which would be interesting to companies here. I mean, I think about construction. Construction is such a it's obviously the biggest market in the GCC, but it's dominated by those neighbours like Bangladesh, India, Pakistan. We worked with the Ministry of Labour fairly recently, looking at bringing in more Pakistanis actually into the UAE. So I'm thinking from a marketing point of view and a positioning, the service sector, English proficiency, all those great service attributes that the Nepalese can display. I think these are the things which will make a win for Nepal in this area.
Tony, and then first for Joseph and for David, a follow-up question. I mean, as you were all mentioning during the conversation we had, is it also boils down to the underlying economics of hiring, the cost of hiring, and it's starting to get pretty much cutthroat now in the context of the bottom line that companies see. How do you see the economics of hiring when you hire somebody from Nepal vis-a-vis hiring somebody from the Philippines or India, Bangladesh? Is it cheaper to hire from Nepal? Is it a lot more reasonable? What are you seeing by way of trends? What's driving Sodexo to go to Nepal other than what you just described by way of great attributes that Nepalese have? There's got to be that bottom line discussion as well, right, on economics. So anybody, David, Joseph, Tony, would like to?
if I could comment on this, and when we hire people, and I understand the economy is a matter of the fact. When Sodexo go for hiring, we don't look at that. And when we go to Nepal, and we look for skills. And I remember about 10 years back, and I used to think that in Nepal, you don't get the technical expertise or somebody with an experience of electrical or plumbing or AC kind of a background. So that point in time, I realized that when I went for a trip and start advertising the role, we got a huge number of response to that advertisements. When we see that, most of them got the Gulf experience. Then I realized that not much of really the local training centers are on the particular area to train. And only when you have a lot of education centers or training centers, you can have the trained skills in the market. So you'll have really attraction. But those people have an experience and they come back and they float in the market, and that's what we hire. So just to answer you on the question, and we look for quality and look for experience and those kind of a thing. We don't really look at that in kind of whether it's economy or not. And Sodexo, as I said in the beginning, we strongly believe in diversity and inclusion. So not many companies talk about inclusion. They talk about diversity. When they talk about diversity, they talk about nationality mix and gender mix. But then we also talk about inclusion. The person who is joining, and there is a half-day program called Sodexo DNA. That's a part of the induction program. Make sure we give the Sodexo injection to people to understand where you are. You know, you enjoy your job here. It's not that big job. It's a career, you're going to have it. We have spent, Sodexo invested millions of euros into online training portal. People can take the trainings on the flexible time while they're working. When you're off work, you can take a training and grow yourself. So, and coming back to the point in Nepal and their hospitality, we are into hospitality. We get a lot of hospitality applicants. And again, when we go for recruitment, we look for pre-experience with an experience and kind of a certification, easy deployment to the job, then go and take them in training. But if that's kind of an availability already there now with Simon coming on board with the vision and value of training center like this, and if they bring some kind of a training or competencies or skills being given to those people, it'll be easy for them to be hired like a global company like Sodexo.
Yeah, thank you, David. I know Baby Joseph was being a little diplomatic in his response, but I mean, for the same skill set and the same kind of individual that has the same skill set, the same demeanor, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, where would you hire them from?
Well, this is going to sound like you preordained me to say this, but I'm going to say because we've got a really strong position because the UAE is taking a leadership approach of actually reducing the visa costs for citizens of Nepal to be able to work in the UAE. Now that is a massive advantage, for the employer and also for the employee, because it allows an attractiveness to actually recruit. So Nepal is one of a limited number of companies which has an incredibly low visa cost to onboard, which is all part of the makeup of your cost of obviously onboarding staff. What I would also say as well is that the only way we will really shift this in combination with things like governments are doing is actually to stop treating it as a commoditized product. Yeah. And you talk of it, you know, and I think you're positioning it very well, is that this is not a commodity. These are humans that have skills, and some people perceive them to be low skilled, you know, medium skilled, high skilled. I think somebody driving, you know, a bus has got a skill, because I see enough people who can't drive a bus that seem to be driving a bus. And that worries me greatly. I do believe fundamentally as well is that of shifting the position of having people better trained will also speed up the whole process of the recruitment and the onboarding. And like Joseph was saying, when we have our people on the ground in multiple countries and including Nepal, we seek X. And people come for the interviews, and we do, let's be clear, you know, we're all interviewing to a degree and a level to be able to find the right people with the right attributes that will fit into an organization, because fundamentally you're leaving your home country to helicopter yourself into another country where you hope you're going to get on with the people you're working with, as in any job, and you're going to be passionate about your brand and what you're working for. To do that, you've got to really disseminate who's got the skill, who hasn't got the skill, or who can be upskilled. Now, if you're able, to Joseph's point, to take the skill that is needed, that Tony's referring to a level, and I'll use, the cleaning industry and the FM industry. Commoditization happened in many industries, including security, many years ago. And unfortunately, people started hiring arms and legs. That is not what people should be doing. You have an obligation to have the best product, and your product is your people. And if your people have got the right skill, you will deliver the right service to your customer, who will come back time and time again. And to me, that is why, if there's a balance between onshore and offshore skilling, which allows people to develop this. I spoke to a housekeeper who left home 24 years ago, and she came from Sri Lanka, and she told me that she had to pay 80,000 rupees to get a certificate so that she could speak English and she could do housekeeping. That took, she tells me, 4 seconds. So she was out of pocket before she even began by 80,000 rupees. And actually what she's developed is her own skill set over the years. What she's further developed is a skill through her employer. And she's now, I think, a non-commoditized person that she never should have been in the first place. But she's got a skill that is valuable to hotels or to shopping malls, or to people like Sodexo. But unfortunately, I think we've seen too many times people just been rounded up and utilized for an arm and a leg, and that's not the way it can be.
Thank you, David. So, Simon, having worked with the Expo 2020 and in the capacity of a CEO, and also your other job that you worked on, any comments in the context of this conversation, Nepal workers vis-a-vis others?
Yes, I think it's, thank you. It's fascinating. I have to tell you, I don't think that we would have been having this debate 5 years ago. I think that there is a significant transformation that is going on within employers. And whilst Sodexo and Dulsco have always been progressive and forward-looking organizations, I think the contribution that David and Joe are now making actually typify the way that the thinking that is going on in a lot of the senior people in positions of responsibility across employers within the Middle East. And therefore, ultimately, they are the employers. So those of us that are involved in the training and in the recruitment pipeline have to listen to them and have to be able to provide them with a better quality worker to meet their needs, but it's got to be done in a way that reduces their costs. It de-risks their employment opportunity, but also they're running businesses. At the end of the line, these businesses, the most important thing is the bottom line. So if we can backload more of that training in Nepal, working with people like UKaid, working with people like City and Guilds to create a state-of-the-art facility, training facility that will build on the DNA of the Nepalese people. And I'm not going to repeat what Joe and David said earlier on in terms of the characteristics of the Nepalese workers, but deeply ingrained in their DNA is this loyalty, is this hard-working ethic, is this trustworthiness. If we can couple that with qualifications, then we will be doing something very good for not only for the families of those migrant workers, but also for Nepal as a whole country.
Thank you, Simon. So Stuti, I wanted to ask Stuti, Stuti is the deputy team leader, as you know, of our Skills for Employment program, and is also director in charge of a strategic partnership. So she's in the midst of a lot of these conversations that happen at the micro level when we are starting to put like-minded folks like you to really embrace some of the thinking that we all collectively have. So Stuti, based on what you just heard and the background of your work before even coming to Skills, the extensive work that you did across other countries in the world, how do you see this conversation that's just emerging in the context of an entry point for a program like ours, but other general observations that you might have before I move on to the conversation about ethical recruitment and others?
Sure, Buljit, thanks. So I want to go back to some of the points that you shared earlier, Baljeet, because one of the things that we're trying to do with this event is also to announce that SEP is open for business. We have some really solid partnerships with on migration as well as on the skill side here in Nepal, but we are looking for new and better ideas. So I want to reinforce some of the operating principles that you talked about, Baljeet, earlier. The SEP program's mission, as you shared earlier, is to create livelihood opportunities for Nepalese. This includes jobs and self-employment here in Nepal and in the foreign labor migration market. To get to that goal, we use an innovative challenge fund mechanism, which essentially is a tool that allows us to provide co-funding and technical assistance through an open, competitive selection process. Integral to our operating model and to how we go about job creation with different partners is our interest to address systemic constraints and entry barriers. Barriers that prohibit Nepalese from fair and equitable access to the labor and job market. As we heard about from our panelists, and you shared about this earlier as well, Baljeet, that entry barriers in Nepal, as we know, it comes from different quarters, from lack of skills and knowledge to inadequate access to financing. Information gaps is a big one, lack of credible certification, and lack of access to job creating services outside of Kathmandu, among others. So the Challenge Fund is providing a tool for committed institutions to address such barriers as they go about job creation. The Challenge Fund, since 2019, it's giving SEP and our partners the ability to catalyze increased investments and to improve collaborations among diverse national and international market actors, like those of us present in this virtual room today. Like you said, we have forged 16 partnerships to date, of which 11 are already up and running. And our partners, if you look at their profile, our partners represent Nepali and international firms. We have a range of partners across all of the sectors that are a priority for us, from agriculture, ICT, tourism, manufacturing, and constructions. Our partners represent both large and established organizations as well as emerging small and medium-sized businesses. And each of these firms bring very unique value propositions and industry-aligned skilling models through which they are contributing to new and productive jobs, enterprise growth, as well as, with examples, some of the examples that you provided, Baljeet, they're also improving trade linkages. Yeah. So on the screen, you see the partnership model with vision and values, led by a very, very visionary gentleman, Padam Raj Podel. And this is one of the examples of a market-based initiative. Vision and values business model was previously only focused on recruitment and deployment of Nepali workers to destination countries. Today, this partnership is helping to connect and integrate skilling, certification, and financing solutions alongside recruitment service. This partnership is helping, it's taken vision and values outside Kathmandu to closer to where the migrant community lives. And it's helping them promote the values of ethical recruitment more widely. The other key element of our operating model that I want to highlight today is our interest and our ability to facilitate linkages with and to being able to leverage the expertise of international firms like Dulsco, City and Guilds, and Sodexo. Because I think, at the end of the day, our interests, it's one and the same. It's helping Nepali and international organizations in their efforts to build and find reliable quality workforce, to be part of this growing fair labor ethical recruitment movement, a movement that's growing around the world, and to really generate a stronger brand value for all of us, including for Nepali workers. So, to sum it up, I think for genuinely interested, committed organizations like the UK-based City and Guilds and Vision Values in Nepal, and all of our panelists here today, SEP can come in as a partner to expand and expedite your efforts, both inside and outside Nepal. And we look forward to staying connected, and I'm happy to speak about our application later.
Right, thank you, Stuti, that's great. Excellent summary. So I wanted to just go back to a conversation that we began. I think, David, you started that discussion related to, the emerging jobs, occupations for Nepalese in terms of where should we be focusing on. But in particular, the interest more is, David, on getting your take on where could we see opportunities for women from Nepal, to seek to graduate into more gainful employment opportunities that would be available. You did delve on a few as you were talking, but I'd like to hear a little bit more from you in terms of where we should be going. I mean, your suggestions, your input.
Look, thank you. And I think we've all been sort of saying the same thing, that there is a certain split between skilled, semi-skilled, and we're calling it unskilled, but they're not unskilled jobs. I mean, take the advent of the food manufacturing industry. Somebody who's accountable and responsible on a food production line that is classed as unskilled, to me, is not unskilled. They have a definitive role to play in that role, and that is a role that they have chosen. Now, they can be upskilled in that role. It doesn't mean they are unskilled to begin with. So I think there are many areas that people across all walks of life can work in, specifically on Nepal, and specifically as we talked about the gender change. It would be amazing to be able to take some specific roles. It's very easy to go to the sort of the normal route. I think hospitality, as Simon said, there's a great deal of affinity with other nationalities in terms of their service ethos. I think from let's talk cleaning, right? Cleaning 10 years ago was to get the job done. Today, in the advent of a post-COVID world, we are talking about a sanitization and a cleaning level that the world has never seen. Whether that's using UV technologies, whether that's using systems and processes, it is no longer an unskilled commoditized job. And therefore, the upskilling needed, as I'm sure Tony will talk to become, whether that's City and Guilds, BICS accredited, whatever it might be, takes the workforce from being unskilled to a skilled operative within the cleaning environment. So from my point of view, I have, and we as a business have a specific needs for semi-skilled, skilled roles right now. We have lots of unskilled roles, as unfortunately the market terms them. And I think we've got to look at how we can recruit, where we recruit, and what we can recruit for what purpose, not the sake of just pulling in an arm and a leg. So if all of a sudden now, Vision and Value said, look, I've got 85 skilled ladies that have the ability that can drive, and we need to upskill them to be able to drive a very large bus within an airport environment, I would put them on a plane tomorrow. And that's genuine. I think we're seeing the needs for much more skilled people to operate at a different level, and especially in the post-pandemic world, than we've ever seen across many industries. There is certainly, I think, a bigger push to have more flexibility in how people work and where they work, because we've seen, as you said, Biljat, that 500,000 people went back to Nepal. The Nepal industry of tourism was decimated because people haven't been able to travel, and so therefore the reverse traction is going to happen, that people are going to want to go back, but to go back and do what? There is no doubt that a lot of people have decided to what we term take off books their employees. So they've gone for less on book and seeking companies to be able to support them for short, medium and long-term assignments. And I think that's where there is a skills gap. In retail, I think there is equally, the flexibility within retail will be enormous as we move forward, as we work with peaks and troughs. And again, in hospitality. But in terms of the more skilled levels that were perhaps owned by being employed by X, Y, and Z, they've now divested those roles and are seeking them from third parties. And that's where I think there's an opportunity.
Great, thank you, Dave. Joseph, what about you in terms of your insights in terms of the future job occupations, especially for women from Nepal? Where do you see?
Baljeet, before coming to that point, and I just earlier comment on the ethical recruitment, I just want to add up something else on that as well. As I mentioned that, when we do recruit, and we follow a very responsible business conduct, and every suppliers who deal with Sodexo, they have to follow the code of business conduct. So we don't allow any kind of a deviations on these policies, and we are very strict on that. And apart from that, and I can also say that in some of the comment about COVID, And during COVID, a lot of corporates and they're laying off or terminating people. And I can proudly say in Sodexo, the UAE, not even a single person being laid off just because of COVID. Okay. And also Sodexo, we created a fund about a part of the employer relief program. We created a fund about 30 million euros, which has been coming from the variable and fixed income of senior leaders and put together. Globally, has been distributed. Those have been put aside for unpaid leave or whatever during that period from March till August. So these are the things I can proudly say about in Sodexo. Coming back to the skill, what we really looking for, as you know, there's in Middle East in particularly, we are into hospitality, particularly into food services. It could be production, it could be services, and also we also do a lot of cleaning as well. So like David said, these days it's not like in 2 hands and legs, and like in those days people used to look at as a cleaner. The COVID has sanitized the crisis and created a lot of challenges, and Sodexo come out with a program of a Rise with Sodexo. This is also to help the employers to make sure they're comfortably, confidently reopening office kind of a solution. So we are looking at any positions, and again, we have a growth strategy. In Middle East, 30% of the workforce or business is into facility and maintenance, and remaining on the food services. So you can say that in the usual flux on the total, especially on the food services. We have roughly about 15 to 20% natural attrition. So that happens. So that's also, one is the development, the other side is natural attrition. This is the way we look for people to be hired and replaced. And coming back to specific question, even we are looking for even skill, as long as we can hire trained people. And as I said, even though Sodexo proudly saying that 50% of our workforce is women workforce, and particularly in Middle East, because of nature of the business, we are one of the world leaders in remote site management. So again, that's a kind of a mindset that we think that women workforce and cannot work in certain industry or certain location. This comes as this year focus from the global CEO to make sure we come out with a policy and make sure we change the proposition or percentages of the women workforce as well. So looking at all the sites and the way it goes, and we are happy to hire any level and into Sodexo.
Thanks, thank you. Tony, just based on the vantage point again that you sit at, and the different countries where you're working in, I mean, where are you seeing some of the emerging job occupations evolving for women and moving away from traditional job roles, as David rightfully described, into more of the progressive job roles? Any observations from your side, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting kind of niche areas which perhaps you may know of it, may not even think about, but there seems to be a bit of a skills gap, like a pharmaceutical technician. So not the pharmacist, but the people that help in the pharmacy itself as an assistant. Even dental nursing, which actually is a licensed activity in the United Kingdom, is something which again provides interesting opportunity for those countries that see that possibility. Also things like in childcare, nursery assistant, classroom assistant, these areas which are obviously very, I suppose in some ways gender biased, but still offer interesting potential for those people who can demonstrate skill and competency in that area. So it's hospitality and catering and food manufacturing, and maybe even to a certain extent, teleoperations, teleworking. These things are coming in. These are big areas, but there's also these interesting niche areas where may not attract the volumes of people, but certainly very well paid and classed as not just semi-skilled but high skilled. So these are interesting areas which there's some discussions that I've had, not just here in the UAE but in Saudi Arabia as well. That is a requirement. Also in tourism, and I'm not talking about hotels and resorts. Funny enough, as working with the Abu Dhabi Culture Authority, they're looking for tour guides, and people with the language abilities. to help and support. So there are things that's coming up here, I think, in the GCC, which will be attractive. Just one note of caution is that the people like Saudi Arabia, probably Oman and Bahrain, are really energizing their national skills base for nationals, and that's in some ways migrant labour negative. Certain countries like UAE, Kuwait, and Qatar, will always need expatriate migrant. Well, I think it's 85% of the UAE population is migrant. We're expatriates, even I'm a migrant worker. So I think there's some very interesting areas going forward, and it'd be down to Nepal, I guess, to really understand that and focus in on and invest. Maybe part of your challenge fund could support that.
Great. No, that's thank you, Tony. And just to keep this thing moving along, I know I'm conscious of the time here. I just wanted to move on to one final conversation regarding ethical recruitment. So, I mean, you heard what we had to say right from the introduction that I made about what's happening really in Nepal, and the view that we have in the context of the employers picking up a lot of these costs. David, any reflections from you as a company? I know you did talk about how you get closely involved with regards to ethical recruitment. What is it that you can do more as a company to help us really, to help spread the word in Nepal and do a lot more in terms of making sure that the costs are really reasonable? Anything that you'd like to add to that, David?
So I think I'm going to reiterate what I said. It helps because, massive help because the UAE government have supported that through the visa costs, which, is already a door opener for companies and for the employees. The more that we can verbalize and obviously make it understood for people what they should be doing and what they should be paying and what they should be coming for, I think the better. It goes without saying that you need to be clear in your own language. So, when we offer letters, they go in their own language. They don't go in English. They can if there is English understood, but it needs to be understood what you are signing up for. It needs to be understood what the company is paying for, what the company will do when you perform, what the company will do at the end of your service, and have that clearly understood right at the very beginning, so there's no ambiguity. So bringing things down, what does a payslip look like? What does my food look like? Where am I going to be staying? It is no good showing pictures of the beautiful countryside and the beaches in the UAE, believing that you're going to stay in a 5-star Burj Al Arab. So that accountability on ground at the point of recruitment is absolutely critical, and that needs to be shared with the recruitment partner so that you go together. So with vision and values, I can see that it is a harmonious relationship that they will have with their potential people that they are putting forward and training to put forward to people like ourselves, because we don't just want a community roundup in District 2 to bring people in that are going to fail in their jobs, fail when they go overseas, and then the cost that flows for the employer is to sadly send people back home, which is spent visa costs, spent airfares, spent medical costs, and nobody wins. So it's far better to put the effort in at the front end, that you then get that longevity that Joseph was talking about, and you're not having to be concerned. And part of what we do as a local company, is we don't believe in just checkbox charity. We're going to actually go on the ground. So when we built the school that the Dulsco employees went over with the Nepalese employees from Dulsco to build, that was a bit different. We didn't just sign a check. We actually put hard muscle into the ground. And that allows people to articulate that through their communities to say, this is an ethical and moral employer that isn't here just for the short-term fix. It's here for the long term.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Yes, Joseph, if you could add to.
If I can compliment
Sure.
what David said is, and I totally agree with David. When an employer hire people, and just want to make sure that we're looking at long term, not really short term. And people like in the company like Sodexo, we take care of all the cost. We look after the visa cost, and we pay for this inbound ticket and every other thing. And on top of it, recruitment agent fees also being paid by Sodexo. So that being said, and what we say, whenever we go for recruitment, we do a kind of a group gathering, make sure we openly announce what we do, what we don't do. What we exactly expecting is a commitment. if at all somebody is coming and joining, unless there is something grave happen and he has to go back. Otherwise, it's nobody's winning, and it's like a loss to the individual, loss to the employer. So coming back to the point, and I'm sure like Sodexo, so many other companies are bearing the cost. And what we expect from the candidate is the mere commitment when we've been decided to, once it's been selected and ready for deployment. So so on top of it, once they come, and obviously Sodexo, and we do put them on many other training, and there are mandatory training. There are, as I said, soft skill training, and also on-job training to go into the different progress in their next career ladder. So so as long as that has been clear, that has been said from the beginning, before people put on the flight, it's been clearly explained what kind of a company they're going to work for, where they're going to stay. And at times, in a company like us, and we work on remote sites, and they shouldn't be thinking that, and they're going to stay in a 5-star kind of a setup. And those who haven't really traveled, their mindset, they got a perception that then it's going to be completely different. Okay, where in back home, and they decided to walk out on the restaurant tomorrow, that could be done, but it cannot be done and like that. And when you come and committed to work in a company like Sodexo, so that clarity and communication has to be clear in their local language or whatever the language they could understand.
Thank you.
Can I just throw in there very quickly that I think, endorsing what everyone said, that I think the welfare of any employee is critical, and even more so for a new employee. It's probably increased tenfold now with post-pandemic. We saw that with people that were, wanting to go home. Having a solid welfare and healthcare background, I think, within an organisation is absolutely critical. And saying that again at the front end, knowing that you'll be supportive, either through the buddy system or whatever, is critical.
Thank you, David. No, I think this is excellent. I think towards the end of our discussion, we'll just wrap it all up. But I wanted to just move on, and I also wanted to acknowledge as Lisa has joined us, and it's really timely because I'm glad that Lisa has also been listening in on this, because she's really passionate about these issues, and she has really been a supporter of a lot of the work that we've been doing. And it's really my honor and privilege to have Lisa here with us, and I'm glad that the Honorable Ambassador's back also to listen to Lisa. Thank you, Ambassador, you're back. Lisa is the Development Director at the British Embassy in Nepal. And before the merger of DFID into the FCDO, she was the head of DFID country office in Nepal, with the responsibility of running the office and all its programs that we have in Nepal. She has a long and distinguished service with the FCO, DFID, and ODA. Since 2008, Lisa has been working with DFID in a range of senior positions. She was the first ever woman appointed to a substantive role when she became the 55th governor of St. Helena. So for all of us with the back British lineage, we probably know what a great position that is she has enjoyed. So Lisa, without any further delay, I'd like you to please talk a little bit about your perspective, Lisa, and how you see this thing evolving. And thanks for being here.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Baljit, and great to see everybody. I must say this has been such a fascinating discussion for me, because as Baljit said, I do have a passion about migration. I think for myself, but obviously the UK line is that we do believe that migration can be a real force for development. I would say that in many countries that isn't necessarily shared by the government of those countries, and often not actually even its citizens. I would count Nepal in one of those countries. I think Nepal government sees migration more as a failure of development rather than a force for good. But I think bear in mind that just in the latest emergency brought about by COVID and the impact that had on the economy, it was remittances that actually held up, even though migrants came back from the Gulf and it was remittances that did not tail off, and therefore the economy did not, although the outlook is not great for poor households, it was remittances that continued to come. I think that says a lot about how migration can be this force for good. I remember some time ago when this debate started, could migration be a force for development? The World Bank did some analysis, and it showed that if obviously industrialized countries spend a lot of money in keeping migrants out because of this mix between economic migration, asylum seeking, for etc. And they calculated that if industrialized countries just brought down the barriers against migration by 4%, that we could solve world poverty, basically, with the savings that were made. So I think that's just such a stark statistic about how the world is not making the best of migration, you know, and we know why, don't we? It's all around the politics. Goods and services and goods moving is all fine. People moving, not quite so. You know, I'm always come back to that statistic about 1,000 Nepalis die. Unfortunately, about 1,000 migrant Nepalis die, unfortunately, every year. And I think that's really quite shocking. It goes back again to the fact, I think the government doesn't value what migrants bring, and they don't, they're not assertive enough in mobilizing them so that they can get the best out of them when they do go. And as someone said, you know, the Philippines are masters at this, and ditto Bangladesh. And I do believe that Nepal's got really a lot of progress to be made to even get near some of those other countries in the way that they treat their migrants. As Stuti said, we are trying to make inroads as the UK into some of this. And it's been great to hear everybody talk about basically ethical recruitment and wanting to really encourage more women and encourage safe migration and get a fair deal. And what Stuti has said is, you know, we are open for business as the UK through the SEP programme for more innovative finance products and upskilling of migrants before they go. Particularly pleased to see City and Guilds in this conversation as well, because Nepal does have to raise itself above others and say that they have something else to offer, and something like City and Guilds and certification will go a long way towards that. So I think just from our point of view, you know, we're really pleased to see this starting and having impact. We're not just a funder, of course. I think there's a number of things that we can do. For example, this policy around Nepali women, we pushed for the legislation to be changed because the evidence showed that the legislation was not stopping Nepali women under a certain age from going. It was actually pushing them into more illegal routes. We do have a programme that's around trafficking, but you know, that policy and law was doing more harm than good for women migrants. I think, you know, we can help companies, as has been discussed here, see migrants more as a good investment and part of their USP from Nepal is they know the Gulf. And as others have said, they are hardworking and committed. So we can support that. I think the bilateral agreements, which we are helping to draw up, is a big way to get the ethical side really sorted out. Migrants need to know where they go if they're in trouble. They need to know what they can expect, and those bilateral agreements are really very important. And great to hear that the ambassador from UAE is on the case for getting that one signed. We would be very happy to have a meeting to see if there was anything more that we could do through our own network as the UK to help that happen. We can help with policies, we can help with legislation. I think that there's something around circular migration in Nepal, because going out, coming back, going out again is all difficult. We know that happens in many, many countries, but other countries have put in place measures in policies that will ease that. I think that the diaspora, once migrants are abroad, there is a role, I think, for government of Nepal to keep in touch with them. Of course, they are the voters when they come home. They are the potential investors when they come home. They will, of course, be keeping in touch with their home country through relatives. But look at what India did with non-resident Indians, and they offered diaspora bonds so that they could invest back in the country as they had money that they could do that with. So I think there's a huge potential, and just to really this vision of migrants is like it's a failure. We need to change the narrative around that. Going out and sending money back to your country is a positive. Look at the Gurkhas, for example, and the way that they're held in Nepali esteem. So we need to shift that sort of the way that migrants are thought of. Easier said than done, I do realise. So I will finish there, but just one further reflection. Balji, you mentioned at the beginning the Global Forum for Migration. And I, for a few years, at the very beginning of that, I was the UK representative to that at the time when Peter Sutherland was the DG of that Global Forum. He died a couple of years ago, and he was previously the DG of WTO, which says a lot, I think, about the transfer between WTO and how the global community was wanting to see migration. What I would say is the discussion we've had today has really moved on from those old days, because that was all, we were almost talking amongst the converted. We knew that migration was a good force for development, but we couldn't just find the levers. So here, what I see is a really good discussion with other governments and employers about how we can push through and do that. I think in Nepal, it's the government that needs to be brought on board a bit more. But I do think we'll get there in the end, simply because it's inevitable. The aging population in the West means that migrants will forever be needed. And so it is the how we get from here to there that we need to pay particular attention to. As you've all said, migrants are not just arms and legs. They are an investment for countries' futures. So I've been really heartened by this conversation, and it's sort of just been so positive to hear it. So thank you for inviting me.
Lisa, thanks very much appreciated. I think you summed it so well in the context of how we are looking at things and how we need to move forward. And there's so much that, Lisa, you said also resonated with the Honorable Ambassador when he started off this afternoon with some of his remarks. So I think it makes a lot of sense, I mean, to maybe also try to hold a little bit of a discussion, Lisa, if you're available, and the Honorable Ambassador, to just compare some notes in the context of things that they're doing, and also given the proximity that we now have with a larger base of employees in the Middle East, particularly in the UAE, where we have a lot more, I think, not only just as SEP, even as WSP working here. So I really would like to see if something can come out of this, Lisa. I mean, the Honorable Ambassador is very approachable. And we could try to get a conversation going and see where this leads us in terms of its next steps, and get people of the likes of David and Joseph and Tony and Simon to also, you know, be the emissaries for us as well. I mean, because they really do embody the kind of passion we do bring to this table. So that's great, and I'd like to really thank you, Lisa, for this.